गुड मॉर्निंग स्टूडेंट्स। आज हम डिस्कस करेंगे डिसीजन मेकिंग यानी कि MMPC 001 की ब्लॉक 3 की यूनिट 9 के बारे में। जो हमारा चैप्टर रहेगा वो डिसीजन मेकिंग रहेगा। तो इसके ऑब्जेक्टिव्स जो है वो दिए हुए हैं। ऑब्जेक्टिव्स के अंदर है कि आफ्टर स्टडिंग दिस यूनिट यू शुड बी एबल टू appreciate the 3 steps of the process through which you make any decision, classify the kinds of decisions you make, and identify the varying degree of knowledge under which you make decision, recognizing the assumptions of different model which either describe how decisions are made or prescribe how decisions should be made. Understand the necessity of identifying and evaluating a reasonable number of possible alternative courses of action for accomplishing organization objectives. And the next one is display familiarity with various meaning for generating alternative course of action. Decide to what extent participation of others is desirable, when and how group decision strategies should be used, and diagnose roadblocks to effective decision making and develop some strategy to overcome them. स्ट्रक्चर में इंट्रोडक्शन है, 3 फेज इन डिसीजन मेकिंग प्रोसेस है, टाइप ऑफ मैनेजरल डिसीजन है एंड डिसीजन मेकिंग अंडर डिफरेंट स्टेट्स ऑफ नेचर है, मॉडल ऑफ डिसीजन मेकिंग प्रोसेस है एंड टेक्निक यूज्ड इन डिफरेंट स्टेप्स ऑफ डिसीजन मेकिंग, इंडिविजुअल वर्सेस ग्रुप decision making, overcoming barriers to effective decision making. And summary introduction, you will possibly agree that decision making is a part of everyday life. The fact that you have taken up a course in management or the fact that you are reading this unit are both product of your decision to them against other alternatives which were available to you. Whether you are a board meeting or in a playground, you are almost constantly making decision, sometimes working on several at a same time. जैसे कि आपको पता ही है कि डिसीजन लेना हर मतलब जब आदमी कुछ भी काम करता है तो या कोई भी काम कर रहा है उसमें कोई सिचुएशन क्रिएट होगी तो उस समय क्या डिसीजन लेना है वो उसके ऊपर डिपेंड करता है कि उससे उनको हार्म ना हो, उनका जो काम है वो मतलब चलता रहे, उससे उसके ऊपर कोई बुरा असर ना पड़े। आपने देखा होगा कि बहुत से लोग होते हैं, अगर वो डिसीजन टाइम पे ले लेते हैं तो उनका जो काम है वो सही दिशा में या सही डायरेक्शन में चला जाता है। अगर वो सही टाइम पर डिसीजन नहीं लेते तो उनका जो काम है वो या जो भी वर्किंग कल्चर है वो डिस्टर्ब हो जाता है। मेकिंग डिसीजन हैज़ बीन आइडेंटिफाई एज वन ऑफ द प्राइमरी रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी ऑफ एनी मैनेजर। जैसे कि बताया हुआ कि डिसीजन मेकिंग जो है वो प्राइमरी रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी ऑफ मैनेजर की, और इसके अंदर क्या क्या इन्वॉल्व होता है, अलोकेटिंग रिसोर्सेज, अपॉइंटिंग पीपल्स, इन्वेस्टिंग कैपिटल और इंट्रोड्यूसिंग न्यू प्रोडक्ट्स। And in this unit various technique involved in decision making, example brainstorming, schematics and nominal grouping are described and discussed. Next one is 3 phase in decision making process. First one is the past, in which problems developed, information accumulated and the need for a decision was perceived. The present and the future, in which decision will be carried out and evaluated in future. And Herbert Simon, the well-known Nobel laureate decision theorist, described the activities associated with 3 major stages in following way: intelligence activity, design activity. Intelligence activity in borrowing from the military meaning of intelligence, Simon describes this initial phase as an attempt to recognize and understand the nature of the problem as well as search for the possible cause. Design activity, during the second phase, alternative course of action are developed and analyzed in the light of known constraint. And choice activity, the actual choice among available and assessed alternatives is made at this stage. So Henry Mintzberg and some of these colleagues 1999 have traced the phase of some decisions actually taken in organization. They have also come up with a three-phase model as shown in figure 1. So phase 1 identification, recognition, diagnosis. Phase 2 development, search and design. Phase 3 selection, judgment, analysis and bargaining the authorization. Next one is sources. Sources Mintzberg, Rezghani and Theoret in 1999. The identification phase, during which recognition of a problem or opportunity arise, a diagnosis is made. It was found that some immediate problem did not have a very systematic, extensive diagnosis, but that milder problem did have. The development phase, during which there may be search for exciting standard procedures, ready-made solution, or the design of a new tailor-made solution. It was found that the design process was a grouping, trial and error process in which the decision makers had only a vague idea of the ideal solution. Next one is the selection phase, during which the choice of solution is made. There are three ways of making this selection: by the judgment of the decision maker on the basis of experience or intuition rather than logical analysis; by analysis of the alternatives on a logical systematic basis; and by bargaining when the selection involves a group of decision makers. Once the decision is formally accepted and authorization is made. Note that the decision making is a dynamic process and there are many feedback loops in each of the phases. These feedback loops can be caused by problems of timing, politics, disagreements among decision makers, inability to identify an appropriate alternatives or the implement the solution, or the sudden appearance of a new alternative, etc. So though on the surface any decision making appears to be fairly simple three-stage process, it could be actually be a highly complex dynamic process. Type of managerial decisions. So personal and organizational decision, basic and routine decision, programmed and non-programmed decision. First classification of personal and organizational decision was suggested by Chester Barnard nearly 50 years ago in his classic book, The Functions of Executives. In his opinion, the basic difference between the two decisions is that personal decisions cannot ordinarily be delegated to other, whereas organizational decision can often, if not always, be delegated. Thus the manager makes organizational decision that attempt to achieve organizational goals and personal decision that attempt to achieve personal goal. Note the personal decision can affect the organization, as in the case of senior manager deciding to resign. However, if you analyze a decision, you may find that the distinction between personal and organizational decision are a matter of degree. You are to some extent personally involved in any organizational decision that you make, and you need to resolve the conflict that might arise between organizational and personal goal. Another common way of classifying type of decision is according to whether they are basics or routine. Basic decisions are those which are unique one-time decision involving long-range commitments of relative permanence or duration, or those involving large investments. Example of basic decisions in a business firm include plant location, organization structure, wage negotiation, product line, etc. In other words, most top management policy decision can be considered as a basic decision. Routine decisions are that the opposite extreme from basic decisions. They are the everyday, highly repetitive management decisions which by themselves have little impact on the overall organization. However, taken together, routine decisions play a tremendously important role in the success of an organization. Example of routine decisions are an accountant's decision on a new entry, a production supervisor's decision to appoint a new worker, and a salesperson decision on what territory to cover. Obviously, a very large proportion of the decision made in an organization are of the routine variety. However, the exact proportion of basic to routine types depends on the level of organization in which the decisions are made. For example, a first line supervisor makes particular practically all the routine decision, whereas the chairperson of the board makes very few routine decision but many basic decisions. Simon 1999 distinguish between programmed decisions and non-programmed decisions. While programmed decisions are typically handled through structured or bureaucratic techniques, non-programmed decisions must be made by manager using available information and their own judgment, as is often the case with manager. However, decisions are made under the pressure of time. An important principle of organization decision that relates to managerial decision making is Gresham law of planning. These laws state that there is a general tendency for programmed activities to overshadow non-programmed activities. Hence, if you have a series of decisions to make, those that are more routine and repetitive will tend to be made before the ones that are unique and required considerable thought. This happens presumably because you attempt to clear your desk so that you can get down to the really serious decision. Unfortunately, the desk very often never get clear. After going through the three types of classification of managerial decision, you could see that there is no single and satisfactory way of classification decision situations. Moreover, the foregoing classification have ignored two important problem-related dimensions. How complex is the problem in term of number of factors associated with it, and how much certainty can be placed with the outcome of decision based on these two dimensions. For kind of decision, modes can be identified: mechanistic, analytical, judgmental, and adaptive. And type of managerial decisions and mechanistic decision, analytic decision, deeply briefed here, judgmental decisions and adaptive decisions. Next one is decision making under different states of nature. In the previous topic on type of decision, you have seen that a decision maker may not have complete knowledge about decision alternatives, high problems complexity, or about the outcome of chosen alternative. These conditions of knowledge are often referred to as states of nature and have been labeled decision under certainty, decision under risk, decision under uncertainty. Decision making under certainty: a decision is made under conditions of certainty when a manager knows the precise outcomes associated with each possible alternatives or course of action. In such situations, there is perfect knowledge about alternatives and their consequence. Exact results are known in advance with complete certainty. Making under risk is important. A decision is made under condition of risk when a single action may result in more than one potential outcome, but the relative possibility of each outcome is known. Decisions under conditions of risk are perhaps the most common. In such situations, Alternatives are recognized, but their resulting consequences are probability, probabilistic and doubtful. As an illustration, if you bet on number 9 for a single roll of a dice, you have a 1 upon 9 probability of winning, in that there is only one chance in 6 of rolling a 9. While the alternatives are clear, the consequences is probabilistic and doubtful, thus a condition of risk may be said to exist. In practice, managers assess the likelihood of various outcomes occurring based on past experience, research, and other information. A quality control inspector, for example, might determine the probability of number of rejects per production run. Likewise, a safety engineer might determine the probability of a number of accidents occurring, or a personnel manager might determine the probability of a certain turnover of absenteeism rate. Decision making under uncertainty. A decision is made under condition of uncertainty when a single action may result in more than one potential outcome, but the relative probability of each outcome is unknown. Next one is model of decision making process. By now you have learned what the different phases of decision making process are, what type of decision you are likely to make in an organization, and under what states of nature these decisions are made. Now you are going to examine three suggested model of the decision making process, which will help you understand how decisions are made and should be made. These three models are the econological model or economic man, the bounded rational model or the administrative man, and the implied favorite model or the game man. You will notice that each model differ on the assumptions it makes about the person or person making the decision. So first one is econologic model of or economic man model. The econologic model represents the earliest attempt to model decision process. Briefly, this model rests on two assumptions. It assumes peoples are economically rational. The people attempt to maximize outcome in an orderly and sequential process. Bounded rationality model, administrative mind model, important question. The next one is sequential attention and attribution. Implied favorite model और गेम्स मैन मॉडल. ये भी इम्पोर्टेंट क्वेश्चन है. उसके बाद हम बात करते हैं टेक्निक्स यूज्ड इन डिफरेंट स्टेप्स ऑफ डिसीजन मेकिंग. In the model of decision making, you must have observed that any systematic approach to decision making start with a proper definition of the problem. You will often experience that a problem well defined is a problem half solved, because the proper definition help you search as a relevant place for promising alternatives. You would also agree that a fair approach to decision making demands that parameters for judging alternatives, which are sometimes referred as a criteria, level of aspiration, decision rules, should be explicitly developed before the alternatives are generated and not after. The imperative minimizes the chance of unnecessary compromise, which is the hallmarks of a low quality decision. Identification of alternatives is also important question. Generation of a reasonable number of good alternatives is used, no problem occasionally. However, developing a variety of goods alternatives can be complex matter requiring creativity, thorough and study. Three means for generating alternatives are particularly well known. These are brainstorming and synthetics are nominal grouping. First one is brainstorming. Brainstorming. Brainstorming is governed by 4 important rules. Criticism is prohibited. Judgment of idea must be withheld until all ideas have been generated. It is believed that criticism inhibits the free flow of ideas and group creativity. First one is freewheeling. Quantity is wanted. Combination and improvement are sought. Next one is nominal group. Nominal group developed by Andre Delbecq and Andrew Van de Ven. Nominal group differs from both brainstorming and synetics in two important ways. Nominal grouping does not rely on free association of ideas. Stage 1, stage 2 and stage 3 and stage 4, stage 5. Creative thinking. Next one is stage in the creative process, stage type and behavior. So preparation, latent period, presentation and evaluation of alternatives. Evaluation of various identified possible courses of action constituent the second step of decision making. Next one is selection of an alternative, implementation of decision, individual versus group decision making. You are perhaps aware that in recent times most of decisions in any large organizations are usually taken by a group of people rather than by a single individual manager. However brilliant, bright or powerful the manager may be, perhaps from your own experience you are also aware of some of the obvious advantage and disadvantage of group decision making, like the one given below. Advantage and disadvantage of group decision making. Advantage and disadvantage. मोस्ट इम्पोर्टेंट क्वेश्चन है एग्जाम के पर्सपेक्टिव से। एडवांटेज एंड डिसएडवांटेज ऑफ ग्रुप डिसीजन मेकिंग। सोर्स के बारे में पूछे तो सोर्स है मैरियर 1999 में दिया था उसने। और इन एस्टेब्लिशमेंट ऑब्जेक्टिव्स, इन आइडेंटिफाइंग अल्टरनेटिव्स, इन एवल्यूटिंग अल्टरनेटिव्स, इन चूजिंग ए अल्टरनेटिव्स, इन इम्प्लीमेंटिंग द चॉइस। इसी तरह से जो हमारा ये इसमें फिर हमारा एक रिस्की शिफ्ट फिनोमिनन है और ग्रुप थिंक है, ये आप पढ़ सकते हैं। बाकी जो ये यूनिट थी हमारी इसमें लास्ट टॉपिक है इसका ओवरकमिंग बैरियर्स टू इफेक्टिव डिसीजन मेकिंग। इंपॉर्टेंट क्वेश्चन है, मोस्ट इंपॉर्टेंट क्वेश्चन। यू हैव जस्ट एग्जामाइंड डिफरेंट आउटकम्स ऑफ faulty group decision process under the phenomenon called group think. In fact, these faults are not exclusive or group decision only. You will appreciate that in the early stage of any decision process, there is a likelihood that a variety of perceptual bases may interfere with problem analysis or the identification of possible solution. इस तरह से इसके कुछ पॉइंट्स दिए हुए हैं, आप पढ़ सकते हैं। ये समरी है लास्ट में जो इसका पूरा निचोड़ है डिसीजन मेकिंग का, ये आप पढ़ सकते हैं। फिर सेल्फ असेसमेंट क्वेश्चन है। इसी तरह से हमारी यूनिट कंप्लीट हुई। ब्लॉक 3 भी हमारा कंप्लीट हो गया। थैंक यू।